Order of operations. What is order of operations? Order of operations is a set of rules that we follow so that everyone that is solving the problem gets the same answer. Without these rules, everyone will interpret the expression in many different ways, and then everyone will end up with different solutions. So in order for everyone to come up with the same and correct solution, we have to follow this order of operations. We use the word PEMDAS to help us remember the orders. P stands for parentheses. E is exponents, including roots, radicals, such as square roots. Multiplication and division. Now, in the wording PEMDAS, multiplication comes first. It does not mean you should do multiplication first. Between multiplication and division, we have to do the one that comes first as you go from left to right. And the same goes for addition and subtraction. Well, A comes first in the wording. It does not mean you should do addition before subtraction. So when it comes to multiplication and division, addition and subtraction, between addition and subtraction, always do the one that comes first as you go from left to right. And then the same case for multiplication and division. Always the one that comes first as you go from left to right. We'll look at some examples here. So let's look at parentheses. Now, the first step that we have to do is what's inside the parentheses. Well, not just this parentheses, anything that has a group in symbols like brackets, braces, or if you have like A over B, something that you can divide and simplify, you can simplify that always, or an absolute value. Those are what we have to do first. And if you have a parentheses inside another parentheses, then you have to do the innermost first, and then work your way out. Exponents are like a number raised to the power. Multiplication and division, as I said, always do the one that comes first as you go from left to right, and the same goes for addition and subtraction. For example, if we look at this expression right here, we want to simplify this expression using the order of operation. So according to order of operation, we have to do parentheses first, which in this case, I don't have any parentheses. Do we have exponents? Yes, we do have exponents here. So we can do those first. 8 squared is 64, and 2 squared is 4, and then bring the rest down. So exponent is done. Now, between multiplication and division, we always do the one that comes first, right? And as I go from left to right, division comes first before multiplication. So that means I would have to divide those two numbers first before I can multiply. So 16 divided by 4 is 4, so you get 64 minus 4, and then bring the rest down. So multiplication is done, division is done, and then we have multiplication. 4 times 4 is 16, and then we can bring the rest down. And then I don't have addition. Subtraction is the next portion, so as you subtract, always do the left-hand side first. Subtract that. And then, of course, the last part would be to subtract those two together to get the 45. So using the order of operation, the correct answer for this problem would be 45. Now, for example 2, let's do the same process. Parentheses we don't have. Exponents we do. So we can take care of those. 10 squared means 10 times 10, which equals 100. 5 squared is 25. And you bring those down and continue the next step. Now, multiplication and division, well, again, division comes before multiplication here, so I have to divide first. 100 divided by 25 is 4. Bring the rest down. And then we have multiplication, so I have to multiply before I can add and subtract. So 4 times 2 is 8, so you get 100 minus 8 minus 3. We don't have addition. We can subtract those two from the left-hand side, and then subtract those two to get the final answer. With example 3, we do have parentheses or brackets as well. So in this case, what we're going to do first is probably take care of those exponents. right? In order to work what's inside the parentheses, I need to simplify that, right? Within the parentheses, we have exponents and multiplication. So exponents are done first before multiplication or before subtraction. And then over here, before I can multiply, I have to do exponent first. So 3 squared will give you a 9, keep the rest the same. Now we can multiply, right? PEMDAS. We did the exponent, the next would be division and multiplication. Well, I do have a multiplication, 5 times 2 is 10, and notice here, when you have a negative and a minus symbol face each other, that turns into a positive. So 9 minus negative 2 is the same thing as 9 plus 2. I want you to keep that in mind. So 5 times 2 is 10 minus 9, and then this turns into 9 plus 2, and then we square that. Now we have to work what's inside the bracket. 9 plus 2 is 11, and of course we can subtract this top portion as well. 10 minus 9 is 1. Now, 11 squared is the same thing as 11 times 11, and that gives you 1 over 21. So our final solution for this expression would be 1 over 121. Example 4, we have an absolute value, division, exponent, multiplication, and subtraction. Remember, absolute values fall within the parentheses. They're the same thing as parentheses. So if I look what's inside the absolute value, I have a division. That is, I need to simplify this number first. And then, of course, we're going to take care of that up to the third power as well. So 32 divided by 4 is 8. And that turns into 27, because 3 times 3 times 3. And then I can still look at what's inside the absolute value. Negative 6 minus 8, that's a negative 14. Keep the rest the same. Absolute value of negative 14 is positive 14. And then keep the rest the same. Now, what I have here is I have a multiplication and subtraction. So why don't we group the first 2 multiplication here and then the next 2 groups. 14 times 10, that's 140, minus 4 times 27 is 108, and you subtract those 2. Now the difference of those 2 is our solution, which happens to be 32 in this case. Example 5, let's suppose we have this expression right here. How do we simplify this expression? Well, we look at what's inside the absolute value, and of course the same thing we can do here as well. So if I simplify this, I get a negative 6, and of course I can take the absolute value of negative 6 as well to turn that into a 6. But let's do this 12 squared first. That's 144. Now I can simplify this and simplify this as well. So absolute value of negative 6 is positive 6, and then the difference of those 2 is 104. Now, notice here, the 9 is being multiplied to absolute value of negative 6. That's why we have the multiplication here. And then the operation that we have is subtraction, multiplication, and addition. And we know that multiplication is done first before you can add and subtract. So 9 times 6 is 54. And then as you go from left to right, subtraction comes first before addition. So we're going to subtract first and then combine those two to get the final answer, 120. Let's look at this example 6. So we do have parentheses. So 8 minus 5 is 3. And then we can simplify. Remember, we can simplify this fraction as well. So that turns into 20. And now if I simplify this portion right here, that would give you a 3 to the 4th. Now we can do the exponent. 3 to the 4th is 81. Now we're going to subtract 39 minus 81. We're doing a smaller number minus a bigger number. That should give you a negative number. and that happens to be negative 42. And if you add 20, that gives you a negative 22 as your final answer. Now, this right here is a number. So what we did is we first simplified that fraction, and then we went inside the parentheses. It doesn't matter whether you start from this or from this, right? This has nothing to do with this portion right here. So it's okay to start with reducing this fraction right here first, and then go to the PEMDAS using the orders. Example 7 here, we have a bracket, and inside the bracket we have parentheses and so on. So let's do the 7 minus 5 first, because within the bracket we have a parenthesis, so that means we have to do the innermost first, which in this case is the 7 minus 5. So if I simplify that, I get a 2, and I keep the rest the same. Now, what you notice within the bracket is you have a multiplication, division, multiplication, and addition, as well as exponent. Well, which one do we do first according to the order? That is the exponents. So if we do that, negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, that's a negative 27. And if I keep the rest. Now from here, we have to go from left to right. Well, we have addition, multiplication, division, and multiplication. So from left to right, multiplication comes first. 2 times 2 is 4. And then the next part would be to divide, because division comes first. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. And then we have a multiplication. 1 times negative 2. Well, 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. And then we can add the last portion. Negative 2 plus negative 27 is a negative 29. And then the last part would be to multiply this. Negative times negative is positive, and 3 times 29 is 87. So the final answer for this problem would be 87 in this case. So in conclusion, order of operation it's the rules that we have to follow through, or that everyone has to follow through, in order to simplify the expression in the correct way and get the same answer.